Sometimes we'll have the same type of tag that we want to have two separate styles. And you can do this pretty quickly with using inline styles. So what I'm doing is I've gone to a code pen and I named it classes in HTML and CSS. So let's say I have a paragraph, for instance. I'm just going to put first paragraph, and I'm going to go ahead and close it. We already know from previous learning that we can go into this tag and we can specify an inline style of, let's say, font family of Comic Sans MS, and do that in our CSS style inside of the HTML. Now, we know that this is not the best way to do this, but that means that if you create a second paragraph and have it show on the page, it will not have that same style. So notice the font doesn't apply because this style tag is not there. But what if you wanted, so for instance, first paragraph with Comic Sans, another paragraph to be a third paragraph with Comic Sans. So you wanted to reuse that Comic Sans over and over and over again. Well, to do that, you would have to take this style, copy it, and paste it inside any paragraph tag you wanted it to apply to. And that can be time-consuming. You could also have a lot of human error when you're doing that. And what if you had a lot of them that you were wanting to do this with? So instead of using inline styles, which we've talked about are best for when you're making a single change, a one-time only, what if we gave these paragraphs a new name? Not just paragraph, but almost like a secondary name. So let's think about like people who name their children the same name as them. So you have like John Smith Jr., John Smith III, John Smith IV. They're all John Smith. They're all paragraphs, but they all have a suffix at the end that makes them different. What we're going to do is essentially add a suffix to these paragraphs to give them a new style. So note that if I go down into my CSS, which is a cascading style sheet, and I go ahead and stylize every paragraph with a font family of Comic Sans MS, it's going to apply to all three. But I really only wanted to apply to the first and the third. So what we're going to do is up in HTML, we're going to give a second name to this first and third paragraph. And we're going to name them with a class. So in the opening parent tag of each of these, we're going to specify a class equal to a specific name. And let's go ahead and call it Comic Sans. When we call it Comic Sans, we then can call upon that down here in our CSS. We can specify that we are in fact going to target a paragraph, but we actually don't even need the paragraph anymore because we've just given this paragraph a brand new name. It's kind of like giving it a nickname. So if you had, a John Smith and you wanted to, instead of calling them John, just like their father, John Smith Jr., maybe you call him Johnny, right? So what we've done is instead of it being John Smith, we've called it Johnny. So we're going to go down here and we're going to type instead of paragraph Comic Sans. But what you'll notice is it won't work. Nothing will happen because we need to tell the computer one more thing. We need to tell the computer that we are calling upon a class. And we need to do that down in our CSS. To tell the computer we're calling upon a class, we're going to put a period before this of .Comic Sans. And the second you put the period, you're saying, okay, computer, I'm calling upon a class, not a parent tag. And the name of that class is Comic Sans, so find the Comic Sans class. And anything I do here will cascade to anything with Comic Sans class. So you'll see the first paragraph is now different. I can then take the class of Comic Sans, copy it, and paste it into the third paragraph, and now both of them have a Comic Sans class. So this is a great way for you to be able to have one paragraph that does something different, like a font family of Arial, and that will apply to the second paragraph, but not the first and third. You can also do cascading styles across multiple paragraphs. So instead of having to go into each of these and copy and paste all of your style in, like a new font color of, let's say, red, and a font or a text decoration of, let's say, underline, You can do that and it will cascade across anything with the name of Comic Sans, just like any change we make to the paragraph will cascade to any paragraph. So if I create another paragraph here called fourth paragraph with no class, you'll see it's Arial. And if I give it, let's say, a color of blue, if I can spell color right, it will cascade across both of them. So you can have different styles occurring for even the same tag. Now, you could even do this for, let's say, a semantic element. So I want a header, and we'll say first header, on one page to be, I don't know, let's say I want it to be a height of 50 pixels, a width of 300 pixels, and a background color of teal. That will apply to that first header. Now let's say I want to create a second header, but I want the second header to look different. Now you wouldn't do this on the same page, right? You wouldn't put two headers next to each other. This would be a second header on a second HTML file doing something different. So let's say, for instance, the first header is your class of homepage header, because your homepage header is going to look different than all of your other headers. So all your other headers are going to be teal. They're going to be 500 by 300, but I'm going to copy and paste that down. And instead of it being header, it's going to be period to say class, home page header. And this time it's going to go ahead and be 100 pixels tall and 600 pixels wide with a background color of green. This would mean that you could have one header doing something on a page while another header does something on a different page, yet they are both headers. And this is important because when you start having pages that are responsive, you can only have one header on the page and the header needs to exist on every page. So you can't use another tag because when it's responsive to a mobile device, it needs to know that the header needs to go at the top. So you can't call it section because then it doesn't know where to put it. So now you've been able to change a header on one of your pages while not on the rest of them. And that is a quick introduction to classes.